Weekly digest of the biggest market stories from the past week. Join host Anna Serin and financial expert Bruce Campbell as they go beyond the headlines to deliver cutting-edge insights into news that move the market. Proudly presented by the Canadian Securities Exchange.
Hi, my name's Anna Serin, and I'm Director of Listings Development with the Canadian Securities Exchange. You're joining us for yet another market recap on Friday, July 22nd, 2022. I am, of course, joined by my wonderful co-host, Bruce Campbell with StoneCastle Investment Management. Bruce, we haven't done this in a little while. I took a little bit of holiday. How you doing?
Good. Yeah, it's been a while for sure. Between your schedule, my schedule, the two of us haven't been together for a long time, and I haven't actually been on the show, I think, probably as long as you have been. So
listen, I have a theory that the markets don't do well when you and I don't sit down and rehash what's going on. That's what I think is happening. So we're back.
There we go. Yeah, they're going to be paying us to do the show more often.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, let's jump right into it. So we're going to talk about some nice stuff this week, which is very nice to come back to. We're going to talk about a potential market rally. We're going to talk about the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act. We'll tell you what that is and how that affected cannabis stocks. And then we're going to get into some LEI data that was released. And of course, end off with some CSE issuer news. So what's going on in the market?
Yeah, I mean, it's been, there's been a bit of a rally here the last kind of week, 10 days. And, everyone's trying to figure out why, first of all, because everyone wants to know why. And then the second thing is that everyone's trying to figure out is this a bear market rally, or have we seen a new uptrend starting? And, from our perspective, it's just a little bit too early to tell. We see a lot of really encouraging and positive things under the surface. We see momentum in stocks where it looks like the selling pressure has subsided. It looks like it actually subsided in middle of June, but we need some type of confirmation. So until we get that confirmation, we can only assume that it's a bear market rally, which is quite common in longer bear markets. You tend to see these rallies that can be, kind of anywhere from 5 to almost 20%. Once they hit that 20% mark, that would be a new bull market. So as long as they don't get to that level, we see a number of those in sort of the longer bear market. So whether or not this is a bear market rally or a new uptrend, we're not quite sure, but it has been good for the markets. We've seen the US markets led by technology. We've seen the Canadian markets. Financials have been a lot stronger. You've seen some of the industrial companies doing well. So it's been great to see after so much pain that we've experienced for the first 6 months of the year.
Okay, so typically we don't see this kind of rally at this time of the year. Normally it's pretty quiet in August or approaching August, isn't it?
It can be, for sure. I mean, if you look at the seasonality of the TSX, it's actually produces fairly strong results in July and August of every year. And then September and October tend to be a little bit weaker. The U.S. markets are a little different. They don't tend to have the same strength that we do in Canada. But yeah, it is a little bit unusual that, kind of when you historically think of people being away and out of the office, that you see the markets moving. There's that old market saying, "Sell in May and go away," and that goes back to the days when we didn't have electronics and we weren't able to be tied into to markets when we were at the cottage or on the beach. And so, as a result, things tended to be a lot lighter and markets didn't really do too much. Well, now it's a little bit different. We all have smartphones and we all are checking our portfolios as often as we kind of really want to, even if we're on the beach. So it's a little bit different. But yeah, the volume has been a little bit lower than what you kind of would expect for a real strong rally. And there's, that's one of the issues that people point sort of their finger at to say why this is just a bear market rally and not a new bull market starting.
I think that the pandemic was probably really the first real influx of traders and trading on their phones. We obviously had the ability before, but I feel like there's a lot of traders that came or investors that came to the market at the pandemic and started utilizing their phones. So that's a really good point. Okay, let's talk about, we haven't talked about cannabis either in a little while. So the Cannabis Administration Opportunity Act has been proposed. So I'll just touch on a few things and then you'll tell us how it affected the market. What they're proposing in the act is to remove cannabis from the Controlled Substance Act entirely. allowing states to have a lot more power over how they handle their own legislation around cannabis. So implement their own policies without federal government interfering. Cannabis business would have access to financial services and removes the threat of a tax code impacting normal business deductions. Regulatory responsibility would fall under the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau. I think it also would increase taxes substantially, if I understand that correctly. But so this is a big move, obviously, in the States. If this goes through, what did this do to cannabis stocks?
Yeah, I mean, this was, if you sort of look at the history of what happened here, a year ago in July, they released the draft of this legislation and said that, you know, they were going to be releasing it soon. And that's just been sort of kicked down the road until they announced it probably, I guess it was maybe a week ago, or just maybe a little bit slightly longer than that they were going to be releasing this legislation, or the bill, and that you know, would head for the different legislative branches to get approved. And so with that, we started to see some of the U.S. cannabis stocks, and interestingly enough, we saw some of the Canadian cannabis stocks as well start to rally. So they've had, you know, fairly strong week here. If you go back to kind of last week and early this week, where, you know, they're up sort of 20-30% off their bottoms. Most people feel that this legislation isn't going to get passed in its form, but what we'll end up seeing is that it will actually allow the door to kind of be opened for the SAFE Act, which we've talked about in the past, which is more kind of the banking perspective of cannabis, not necessarily decriminalizing the plant itself, but just allowing those businesses to have access to banking services. And so most people feel that this is kind of dead on arrival, that the bill won't get passed, but it, you know, it's the same old politics where, you know, they won't pass this, but then they'll work on getting the SAFE Act passed. And, you know, so it's not going to legalize marijuana per se in the US. You know, that's going to be something that probably has to come down the road, but it should allow for easier access to banking, which most people feel could then potentially increase the ownership potential for cannabis, because then you'd have some institutions coming in.
Yeah, and just to remind people, I mean, probably the reason we saw the bump, or one of the reasons we saw the bump in Canadian cannabis stocks, is that U.S. citizens really, unless they're trading up in Canada, one of the only accesses they have to investing in the cannabis market is Canadian companies that are listed on U.S. exchanges. So that might have been one of the reasons for the Canadian side bump. How long has that SAFE Act been bumping around?
I think this is the 7th time now that they've tried to attach it to a bill, and it's been passed through the House, but then it always gets held up and gets turned away at the Senate level. So, you know, maybe 7 times the charm, or whatever the saying is.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, I mean, it got people excited. So it's nice to see the cannabis have a nice day in the markets again. And hopefully that, I guess it's 1 step forward, 2 steps back, but hopefully it means it's still moving forward. Yeah.
And interestingly enough, you know, we both Jordan and myself, when we're on the show, we talk a lot about technical analysis. And one of the things we've noticed is that, you know, kind of over the last really kind of 6 weeks, we have seen that selling dry up in the cannabis market as well. Hasn't mean the stock prices have started to move up, but we've just seen some changes in the momentum. And so, you know, this could potentially be the next move that's going to move that market upwards. And when that happens, it's often quite exciting for investors, for sure, because the volatility is high, both on the up and the down.
Absolutely. Yay, cannabis. Okay, let's talk about the LEI. So remind us what the LEI index is.
Yeah, it's an index of leading economic indicators in the US. And what we watch here is to make sure it stays above that zero line. As you can see, it's been dropping down. The number was still positive, and it's still above that zero line. When it gets below that zero line, there's been you know, fairly strong correlation to recessions. And so, you know, most people expect that we're going to hit this recession either late this year or early next year. We haven't really seen confirmation from the LEI yet. So that's, of course, what we're watching, just to see that confirmation. It is a lagging indicator. So even though it's called the leading economic indicator, it is still lagging. So, you know, there's a chance that it hits the zero line, you know, closer to when we hit the recession versus say something like the yield curve, which has been negative now for several weeks, right?
Interesting stuff. Well, I guess we'll wait and see what happens. When does the next data get released?
It's a month from now, so it's a
Now.
monthly data set.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, we're going to talk about some CSE issuer news, my favorite part of the show. I'm especially excited about talking about this issuer today because I had the chance to meet the team. I was in Calgary last week for Stampede. Was that last week? I believe it was. And met the team, and they're a great team. It is a CSE issuer, Apartment Love. So Apartment Love is a provider of online residential rental marketing services. It's for landlords and renters, and it's in now more than 30 countries on 5 continents around the world. So this is kind of a neat story because it reminds me a little bit of the Uber and those types of and the technology around those. So we're starting to see kind of these darlings come back. They have had incredible growth. Natural growth, and they just announced that they took over. I'm not sure if you recognize this name, Bruce.
I do.
But you should. They just took over Owner Direct Vacation Rentals, which started in your backyard.
They did, yeah.
So they started as a short-term rental for ski chalets up right by Bruce in Kelowna, and kind of filtered out from there to lots of ski resorts, and now have just become kind of a massive short-term rentals. So they're long-term and short-term rentals now. So they've just had incredible growth. We haven't seen a great technology story like this in a while. What are you seeing in the tech space?
Yeah, I mean, there's still lots under the surface. One of the challenges has been, especially this year, is that tech's been harder to finance. So, companies that were looking for capital haven't been able to raise it. So their growth rates have probably slowed down to a certain degree. That being said, we have, with this market rally that we've seen here, we have seen technology leading the way. So, maybe we're seeing a bit of a torch pass from the commodities and those sectors into, kind of what has been more traditionally growth. And that's, again, something that we're going to have to watch and see if we get that confirmation.
Wonderful. Well, this is all good news. Hopefully we keep on the uptrend, right?
That's right. That's a new uptrend.
The new uptrend. Listen, it was great speaking with you, Bruce. Is there anything we should think about going into next week?
Well, next week's going to be a big week. We have the Federal Reserve making their decision on interest rates, and that's going to be a big one. There's been lots of talk about why this market's rallied, and the thought is that initially the market was thinking they were going to do 75 basis points, and then it moved up to 100 when the inflation data came out. But now the thought is that no, they're only going to do 75, and maybe they're getting close to being done. And that's one of the potential reasons for this move. So it'll be really interesting to see what they do with their interest rates, but also what their comments are after they made that decision in the press conference, because people are going to be watching every single word that that Jay Powell says and dissecting it into a million different pieces so that they can figure out, what's the Fed doing and is the market going to go up or down?
Look, I mean, it's a real problem. I think the last number I read in Canada, it was 7.6% inflation. And I believe in the US, it's 9 point something.
9.1.
9.1. It's a serious problem and it needs to be dealt with aggressively, I think.
Yeah, and that's what they've said they were going to do. So we'll have to see how far they go, and the numbers with the inflation numbers have to really kind of trail off before they can take their foot off the gas.
What day is that meeting?
I believe it's a 2-day meeting, so it's the 26th and 27th.
All right, we'll be watching for that, and we'll talk about it next week.
We will, yeah.
Thank you so much, Bruce. You have a great weekend.
Thanks, you too.